Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Denise.
I'd like to welcome you all to this wonderful forum lecture that we're going to have today, Micronesian Rising. And I know that in conversation with all of the students, faculty, community members, this has been a constant conversation. Change is upon us. Challenging change, but also empowered change, making things better. So today we are blessed to have three folks working to create change in this wonderful place that so many of us get to call home. So Dr. Ratior will be doing introductions. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon.
Actually, you can hold the applause because applaud at the end if you think it's worth the applause. So, I'm Chuki, so I have to start with the proper respect from us, Chuki, so from our team. Thank you, Denise, or Dr. Owen, for the brief introduction. We did tell her that we'll do the introductions ourselves, just to try to, I understand we have 1 hour and you have to go to classes right after 2 o'clock, so I'm going to ask Dr. Owen to just keep us on track with time.
I will.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Kasilelia, Paingkong. Good. Mogitin, and the greeting that I've already said, but Fairo, okay, to all of you. Micronesia Rising, hashtag Micronesia Rising, actually it was just something that we threw together to sort of encapsulate what we hope we will sort of cover in this hour-long conversation, dialogue with you all. This is a real privilege for me as a Chukis, as an FSMer, to be back here. I'm always grateful to be back in this, our national campus, this college that is training, as I look out, the current and future leaders of our nation. So my colleagues and I are really privileged to be here in your space, to share some thoughts, to listen to you, and hopefully toward the end of our time together, you'll leave and we'll all leave inspired to continue to do what we need to do for our nation. That's a brief overview. In terms of agenda for today, you know what? I'm gonna take this off. Oh, sweet, perfect. In terms of our agenda for today, briefly, Micronesia Rising, so essentially Micronesia Rising from within, and I'll explain that in a little bit. I'll just for a few minutes I'll briefly provide the context of our discussions today, and then I will introduce myself and perhaps the journey that I've taken to be where I am today, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Shanti to introduce herself and what matters to her today. And then she'll turn it over to Yolanda to also do the same, introducing her work in activism. And essentially what we've sort of decided to talk about is this question: what matters to us and why? In other words, what matters to you and why? Hopefully at the end of that, of our hour together, we will have addressed or at least reflected on that question. Okay? Whether you're a student or a faculty or staff, whether you're from Chu, Kushrai, Pohnpei, and Yap, or whether you're from another country who is here living in our country and supporting the efforts of our college. I'll begin with just a little bit of context. So in 1832, some French explorer happened to be making a map, and in their view, there are some groups of islands that are super small, tiny islands. They decided to call them Micronesia. Micro, small, Nesia is a Greek word for islands. That's how we became Micronesia. They decided that these many islands down south of us, because there are many of those islands, many, Nesia islands, they became Polynesian islands. Because of the complexion of the people that make up these islands, including the Solomon Islands and the dark complexions, real dark skin color, they decided that the tone or the skin, the color is going to identify these people, and so they became Melanesia. What became different for us is that we became identified by the smallness of our islands, the size of our islands, the color of our skins, and we became separated because of those designations. I'd like to suggest to you that perhaps this is what we should be defining ourselves. What is forgotten in the foreign designation and definition of our ocean, the Oceania, is actually the greatness of ourselves connected by the ocean that we all share. Dr. Apeli Hauofa, a Pacific scholar, had this to say about that. We shall never be defined by the smallness of our islands, but by the greatness of our oceans. In other words, we should not be letting others define who we are, but that we should be defining who we are. That's the context that I'd like to leave, or at least suggest for us to think about as we continue in this effort. Further context. I don't know if you can make out this. There's 4 images on this. You notice equality, equity, liberation, and inclusion. Notice when people are seeking equality, they want every resource to be the same. Notice what is happening here. Right? That small child is not looking over there even though they have the same shortness. Okay? When we seek equality with other nations, this is essentially what we're asking for. Okay? Equity is the opportunity for people to have what they need in order to succeed. In other words, if you turn it around in terms of a college experience, a student, if you give every student the same resource, the same service, they may not be reaching their destination, they may not be graduating the same because some students need more than others. I'm suggesting that this is where we need to be moving as a nation and as people. But really, what we should be heading toward is liberation. In other words, taking down these barriers so that we can be spectators. Take down every barrier that prevents us from being part of the game. You might think, well, that's great. That's where we need to be. But there's actually an even more greater goal for us. To not just be liberated, but to be included. We're suggesting that where we are, what we're here for is to perhaps talk about this component of where we are in our nation, right? We've asked to be equal partners in the world. We may have been given some opportunities, maybe the compact is giving us some resources so that we can play with the rest of the global community. We've claimed by our constitution that we're liberated, right? We have chosen our own country. we've made our own, we are not defining ourselves. Now, we need to be part of the game. So, purpose of our, why are we here? What is the reason that our team is here? Briefly, we're here because we're part of an organization called PREL. PREL stands for Pacific Resources for Education and Learning, PREL. That's a Hawaii-based organization that has resource centers in the 4 states in Palau and the Marshall Islands. Vision of that organization, PREL envisions strong schools, healthy communities, and thriving cultures, Pacific hearts, and global minds. The mission remains the same as ever when it started, but we've committed ourselves because there's a new direction that but that actually integrates with what I've just talked about in terms of liberation, in terms of what we need to do as Pacific Islanders, as Micronesians, as FSMers, to take control of what we do. There's a new CEO at PREL. I put in this quote here because I think that sort of captures the spirit of that. We cannot control the direction of the wind, but we can adjust our sail to always reach our destination. You and I cannot change the direction of the wind, but we can adjust our sail to always reach our destination. I think this is where PREL is heading. This is the adjustment that's being made, and this is what we sign up for. So, in short, PREL wants to expand Micronesian driven projects and programs to support educational reform in this nation. We and PREL wants to recruit Micronesians, college graduates, experts to take on nation building for ourselves. That's what we've signed on to, and that's why we're here. We've been meeting with national leadership, state leadership here in Pohnpei, of the national government, essentially to share this story. Micronesia has a compact of free association with the United States, so that we can go get our education here, maybe overseas, ultimately to return to build a nation that we have said we want to build for ourselves. That's what we're here to do. Okay, introduction for myself. I've said enough about the context. My name is Vidalino Ration. I used to be known as Vidalino Jones. So for those of you who, well, I don't know any of you, actually maybe with the exception of Professor Henry, who was a student of mine at Xavier. I was a teacher and administrator at Xavier High School. I was Vidalino Jones. For 30 years of my life, I grew up as Vidalino Jones. And so was my family. Until today, my brothers and sisters still carry this name. How did this family get Jones with no DNA in us of any Jones family? My last name, Ratior, who was a chief on an island in Chuuk called Onon, master navigator, traditional chief. When missionaries came to our islands, they baptized our ancestors, and then they decided to baptize our ancestors with foreign European names as if our own names were not godly enough. As if the names that our ancestors carried could not make it into heaven, even though God created us too. So, Ratior was baptized Jonas, or Johannes, of the Spaniards. And then when the Peace Corps volunteers came to my island, and they wanted to put names on their roster, they decided they asked kids, what's your last name? Now, mind you, I come from Chup, from one of the matrilineal culture in Chup, where if you want to know who somebody is, you ask, not directly of that person, but you ask somebody else, who's his mother? Yeah, ina. Because if you know the mother, then you know exactly how you fit into the lines. You know who that person is, how you're related to them, because everything, every wealth, every land, every line passes through the mother. When Peace Corps volunteers came to our island on American rosters, American school system, they reversed that. They asked, who's your last name? Who's your father? What's your father's name? Ratia. Baptismal name? Jonas. Jones. So, from there on, my siblings became the Joneses, and everybody been chasing the Joneses of folk, with no Jones DNA in us. When I turned 30, I was studying in Berkeley, theology at Berkeley. I decided to reclaim, I didn't change, I reclaimed my indigenous family name to honor our own roots. It took me 30 years to have the courage to do that. So, that's who I am. I just finished my doctorate from UH Manoa. Previously that, I worked at UH Hilo. I think I might have been here. I don't know, some of you were here when I was recruiting for UH Hilo. Respect to all the many UH Hilo alum here, your college, but also in the nation. 5 years as director of that program. Previously that, I worked at Santa Clara for 10 years as associate assistant director of their Center for Multicultural Learning, as well as their international programs. That's the background to which I'm here, sort of to share our story. I'm going to end there because I want to give some time, I want to give more time to my colleagues, these strong women who I'm so super stoked and super proud and honored and humbled to be in their presence. I'm going to, oh, by the way, that's my family. And I always show that. When I show this, even in Hawaii, this is just an aside. I use this slide right here too. When I go out to do professional development for teachers in Hawaii who are working with our Micronesian communities who are struggling there with identities because they don't want to be known as Micronesians or Chukis because everybody thinks negatively of our people. I show this proudly as yes. This is the Chukis. Yes, this picture was taken in 2005. That's my wife now. Yes, we still live like this on that island. Proudly. Sadly, some of the Chukis, young people will come up and spread their best. You have to show that. Because now they think, oh man, now they think really backwards. But I show that proudly because that's my root, that's my heritage, and that's what I've done. I just, aside, part of the work I'm doing now is to develop with PREL, is to develop a Teach for Micronesia project. Essentially, this is a project that involves 48 countries around the world, in 6 continents, to inspire, encourage, inform, and train college graduates to teach for 2 years in our high-need public schools in the nation. You'll hear more from me. I don't want to bore you with that, but that's basically my role on the PREL team to develop that. And it is really important for me and for us to be here to engage with you, to tell you that there are, I'm no longer young, I'm 52, but there are young professionals who are rising professionals who are taking on this work of nation building, and we should all be proud of that. So I will leave it at that. I'm going to now turn the mic over to Shanti to introduce herself and to talk a little bit about what matters to her, why she's here, what is it that she wants all of us to hear.
Privileged and humbled to be here for this opportunity. I want to first thank COM and the staffs for making this possible, expanding on the scope that brought us here today. I also want to thank you especially because if you're not here, we would have been talking to ourselves. So thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm here, this title, it appears very fancy, but I am only with PREL because PREL has the pathway that I wanted to travel in. When I started, first, I am Kusrayan, Ponapean. I was raised in Kusray, born in Ponape. I am a graduate of Kusray High School. Then I went on to Chaminade University, and after Chaminade, I came back to serve the government and my people. This journey, it was a very difficult journey to travel on, especially for an islander or being a female in our society. But this journey started when the question is what made you interested in doing what you're doing today and why? So it started as this seven-year-old standing in classroom and saying, I have to thank our teacher because they opened that door for us to dream when we were that young. So I stood up and I said, I wanted to become a lawyer. But I didn't know what lawyers do, but it sounds really cool. So I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And then from a childhood dream, it transformed into a class representative. Because I came and debated for a national team. And from that, it continues to become something bigger. Something bigger, and that's really what I wanted to highlight to you, that even when Vid was showing it earlier, that we became liberated and we want to be included, it was really because of that bigger thing. It has to be bigger than what you want. It has to be something bigger than just your family obligation, responsibility, a state pride, or whatever you call it. But it ended at being a duty. I felt that I have a duty for my nation to be that person sitting across the table from me to negotiate. That's really what really pushed me to pursue something that I felt was very overwhelming. And when I came back from my post-undergrad, you always ask yourself if you're built for that. And for graduating from a public school, I always get intimidated because I didn't speak good English. I write better, but I have this really strong Kusrayan accent. But still, I didn't want to let my state down. So I keep fighting. And then I came to the national government working at Foreign Affairs. And then I kept having that sense of duty. So from sitting across from other foreign councils that provide us legal opinion of how we should bring our country forward. And I'm asking myself, wait, I think I can be one of them. How is it that we can't? We were trained to do it. So I went to law school. And that journey was not easy. It was not easy, but if you are driven by something that I said was, it's whether it's a dream, started off as a dream, and when you keep building yourself, it went from state to national interest. That's when you find yourself when you're tired at night studying for an exam and knowing that if you don't pass it, you're probably getting dismissed. Like that's when you look back and you're like, my family's waiting for me, my state invested in me, and my national, they have confidence to pay for my school to come here. Those are the nights that you need all those factors to push you. And of all of them, we all grew up in very religious families. I keep saying that there are things that we can handle. We have control over. Like getting up and study at night, that's something that you have control over. But everything else, like time for the checks to get printed out, those, just let God handle those because you cannot worry about everything else. So there's so many things. The question earlier was, what made you do this? It's really because I have pride, I have confidence in my people and who brought me up, given me the education. We have all the teachers, they got up early in the morning, they drove all the way to school just to be there for us. So we're doing this for them. So the point I wanted you to take home today is you need to know why, what is your what and what is your why. It's not based on my what and why, it's really based on your what and your why. And then you just have faith and believe that what you were being taught in school, those will get you through. And you know, now that I'm back with TREL, it's an honor to, even if I'm, you know, situated in Hawaii, I still wanted to believe that that opportunity gives me that channel for me to keep supporting my people until I come back. So for you all, I know that other people are worthy to be standing here to tell you their stories, but thank you so much for letting me tell you my stories. And I have faith in all of you. Just go out there and come back and be leaders for all of us in the future. We just need to be included. That's what was really the point of all this. Let's build our capacity, and then from that, we become people who are sitting and representing our country because we know what our challenges are. We know what our culture is. And from that, you know, putting your heart into your work, I believe there's really nothing, it's only going to be successful. So thank you so much. I'm sorry if I really got out of, you know, what I was, you know, expected to say today, but that's really what I want to tell you. Thank you again so much. Have a good